Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Blade the Series episode Trace, episode 3. So, really, for this episode, I would call this episode the classic case of filler. Really, within this episode, it's really just a lot of stuff going on in the middle that is just like, hey, here's what the vampires are doing. So that way they can have something to do for a following episode. So that way they have this here as a blueprint of something that they're going to use later. But really, also, we do have a conclusion of some character. We also have in this episode, we really have to just start bizarrely just adding people in for no reason. We just have to add people in just because we can add people in. The guy that actually plays Kane in this episode, I have actually seen him in this show called Smallville. He was in the later seasons, and he came in as one of the people of the Legionnaire or the Legion to save Chloe in some Smallville episode. So I immediately when I saw this guy in this episode, I'm like, who does he reminds me of somebody, and then I'm like, oh yeah, he reminds me of the guy from Smallville. Oh, okay. Also, the guy that plays Winston in this show, I think I have seen him somewhere also too. Like he has a very familiar face. But anything, so with that said, really, this episode is mostly kind of dedicated to Vampire Ash in this episode. Plus, it is also to showcase that Detective Boone is not going to go down swinging. Plus, also, we are going to have us counting the minutes of how much really Blade is on screen. Plus, we also have to say, where is the gaping hole in someone's shirt? Where is the huge hole in someone's shirt? And eventually, when somebody watches this episode, they'll understand why I have to ask that. Plus, also, we end up having the most bizarre-ish thing for a vampire to do just so they can get a more understanding of the way that the House of Chthon or the vampires live. Try to get some more dialogue between two people to understand more things about the vampires and kind of understanding how things are laid out within this world. For again, Kirsta that doesn't know. Because we consistently have to keep doing this, because Kirsta is like the audience that has never heard of a Blade thing in their life, and that's perfectly okay. Because at the end of the day, I don't know about Blade either. A lot of times I don't barely even know any of these people in this show. But Fritz is Fritz, a person that I finally know who the name of it is. And so we have Fritz, who is to be this guy who is bizarrely just pounding on some human sack of thing in this episode. But it also seems that Fritz is also going to try and beat up Blade yet again. They have to try to change the environments or whichever so it doesn't look like Blade is getting beat up by Fritz in the same place, but it all looks like the same exact thing. It kind of looks like they took this one place and they just recycled it over and over. It seems that the environment of which that they are filming in, they are just kind of reusing the same set pieces, but maybe painting them different, or having them being separate wings, and then all of a sudden, hey, this is the same thing that was used in this episode, but now it's used differently somehow here, by just kind of having a different exterior but it kind of feels like the same spots in a lot of places. It kind of feels like they're roaming through the same set pieces for like the show over and over and over again. And like it's just made to look different through every single episode. So with that said, yeah, like if you're gonna do something cheap, do it that way, I guess. So going into this episode, that's all I think I wanted to say. I'm probably gonna also probably rush through this review too, because really, like we have like this episode to me just felt like a filler episode, and really it just was made to legitimately just have us conclude certain things, or to have Krista kind of going through some growing pains within this episode. So that's all that really legitimately is of interest within this episode. Let's get into spoilers for this one. Let's go into that coveted spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time again to spoil this episode. So going into this one, I don't know what's going on with my hair / bandana in this review. Ugh, I guess it's like really showcasing. Like this is kind of towards the tail end of my day for today. So like this one is kind of like plugh. Like I feel like plugh. But I think I have one more review in me after this one's done. Train to Busan! If you've ever seen that movie, go ahead and check it out. But anyways, let's go into spoilers. So, really, for this episode, so we are to show like a bunch of like roundabout ways of all these like vampire advancements in this show. So there's gonna be a lot of crap that's just all over the gosh darn place with this one. So we are to have Marcus, who is to have Winston, this character Winston, to come in to see all the advancements that they're doing with Fritz. It seems like he is immune to silver to the point to where Chase is consistently poking him with it, to the point to where he's enjoying it. And so we have in this episode that Fritz is going to supposedly be shipped off to some other part of a vampire establishment, because they don't want Blade to get the secret ingredient to Fritz. And so it's basically just like, okay, Fritz, well, since we've like created the perfect vampire, now we're gonna try to get rid of him. Yeah, so here's also the thing. So we have Krista, who is having nightmares in this episode. We end up having her who is sleeping, and so she has a nightmare or night terrors or whatever. She is dreaming about her mother bizarrely coming into her room and giving her breakfast, and Kirsta is like, "Mom, what are you doing here?" And then all of a sudden, Kirsta is just going like, you know what? Like, I need some of that mom neck, bizarrely. Like, I need to go and just come on my mom's neck and kill her. And then I'll be like, why? And then Kirsta's waking up from her dream. And so we have Fritz and Chase that are at the door of Krista. And so Chase is like, God, like she has night terrors and all this garbage, and Fritz is, you had nightmares for like 10 years. Like, give her a break. And Chase is like, yeah, but like, I don't like her, so like, I want her to just suffer. Or I'm like, she's not really winning me over yet. She's not really putting points in the vampire column. So, so we eventually have Krista, who is going and taking a shower. Another pop shot at us seeing Krista in all of her glory. Pretty much, you can kind of see like a gapping in between her robe. But here is also a thing: you don't actually see a hole in her shirt where a piece of wood should have been at the end of this episode, and that's what bugged the crap out of me. I'm like, dude, where's the hole in the shirt? Like, I don't care if, like, well, we couldn't have shown that because the show is cheap. You could have shown something. Like, give me something. Like, there should have been a hole there. There should have been some, like, blood or something. But they couldn't have showed that because they didn't want to show how severe her injury was. So, like, they could have camera wise figured out some way to like cover that up or whatever, because that looks like garbage. It does. So pushing on, it does matter. This show is over with, so it's canceled. It's okay. So, uh, and and why am I like really like just snipping at the knife with this, or snipping at the scissors with this? I don't know, but it's fun. So going into this, uh we have Blade, who is actually doing things in this episode. Yeah, it's a surprise, but it happens. Blade is going to some reverend, and it seems that this reverend is kind of dealing in all kinds of things. Uh, and eventually, this reverend is to also be quasi somehow dealing with Vampire Ash. And so we eventually have Blade, who is to discover one of Kane's men, and Kane is a guy that is dealing Vampire Ash to the public. It seems like he's a dealer of Vampire Ash, and eventually he is to be testing his own product, and is to or no, backpedal. Some of his dealers are testing their own product, not uh, Kane himself. So we have Kane, who's trying to like crush the Vampire Ash so much that he can like really try as much as possible to sell like the smallest amount to people. So we eventually have one of Kane's dealers who is to eventually land in the hands of Blade. And so Blade is to interrogate this guy to find out where Kane is. And eventually, this guy gives Blade nothing, but eventually, Blade finds out where this guy goes, and that's immediately to Kane. And so, Blade ergo goes and finds Kane by proxy. So here's also the thing. So we eventually end up having Kane going and killing this guy who is Winston. I don't know why, but he ends up taking a arrow to him and killing him off. And so Marcus is eventually going to some environment where it seems that these people, I guess, are being in these bizarrish chairs for reasons I don't understand. And so we have this woman who is to tell Marcus that now Winston is dead. And so it seems that Marcus is saying, like, well, hey, like, it seems like you had a number of clients. Like, how many numbers of clients do you have? And this woman's like, well, 4. Winston would have been 5. And so I think Marcus is trying to figure out a way to sell quite something to somebody here. But I guess we'll deal with that later. So we have Marcus, who, since Winston is dead, Marcus is going to go after Kane. But he has to eat a bizarrish dinner with Krista. So we have Krista, who went in her shower and had to get her serum. And here's the obvious shot where you get to see Krista in all her bathroom glory. And so we have her come out of her bathroom, and she is to be welcomed by Marcus with a robe. I'm like, what is up with Krista and Marcus? Is Marcus just going and like, you know what, I want to get me some of that. Like, I want to get me some of that Krista. I don't know why, but I just want to get me some of that. Because especially towards the tail end of this episode, you have that feeling. So we have Krista, who is going with Marcus to go and have a bizarrish actual food and or dinner with actual food which is the stupidest thing that I've ever seen in a vampire show in my life. We have Marcus and Krista who is eating actual food. I'm like, so in other words, like, these writers could not figure a freaking thing out to actually have these vampires be doing anything. Like, they could have been having a cup of blood joe, like Angel used to do on his show. Like, yeah, they could have been having some drink of like blood together, and that would have made a lot more sense than like basically Marcus having to rationalize that they actually have no nutritional or whatever value of eating actual food, but it just seems pleasurable to eat food. Like what? So that way you can just poop those out? Like, yeah, it's really pleasurable to just eat these things just to them out later. That's the only value it has. To just it out later. Yeah, it's really thumbs up quality there. So we push on, and so we have Krista who is to eat this food, and she is to go, "Ooh, I'm sick. I'm sick, Marcus. I'm going to pull off to the side." And so Blade is just bizarrely like pouncing on Krista whenever like Blade has nothing better to do but to just sneak on Krista whenever she's anywhere. And so Blade is telling Krista, "Hey, yeah, sucks to be you that like you have a little bellyache, because if anything, regular food and the serum don't mix." And so we have Blade who Batmans and vanishes off, and Marcus is coming to just comfort Krista. It's like, "What happened, Krista? You have a little tummy rumble? Did that not work out for you, the regular food?" So we eventually have Krista who is talking to Fritz and kind of mentioning about the drug that Fritz is on, the ambrosia or whatever it's called. So we have Krista trying to get some information out of Fritz, like to see what he drops and what he mentions. And so we eventually have Marcus who goes to Krista and is like, "Well, hey, it seems like you are questioning Fritz about the ambrosia." And because Krista's like, "Well, yeah, because like if he has it, like I want all of us to have it." Like that's what that's what Krista is saying out of this. That she's like, "You know what? I want a piece of that, like ambrosia. Like I want to be super vampire." And so Marcus is like, "Oh, I get what your play is, liar. I should have killed you years ago when we only had 2 episodes before this." So we have Marcus that is telling Krista, like, "You know what? Like, I think you should go out with Chase and try to take down this Kane fella. Because really, like, he's been a thorn in my side for 1 episode, barely now, and so I need you to just take him out. Like, I think that you're the perfect candidate to take a normal human being out because you were a military person. So go ahead and take them out." So here's the thing that I completely forgot about, because Detective Boone is just having these little snippets here and they don't really matter to me. But he's in this episode. So in the very beginning of this episode, we had Boone who was in this clear bag, and he was just kind of stuck in this bag being trucked out somewhere. So we have Detective Boone who opens his bag by pulling out his vampire teeth and opening this bag to get out of this bag. And so Boone breaks out of this truck, and so the truck driver ends up realizing somebody had broke into it. So this driver is tempted to just pull this big, huge red button, which normally you don't ever pull a big, huge red button in a vehicle, because that's always a bad move, because Men in Black will tell you that. The movie Men in Black, if you ever remember it, with Tommy Lee Jones and Will Smith. It is what it is. So, we have Detective Boone, who is to appear from behind people, and that's what his MO is going to be in this episode. We have Boone, who's appearing out of the shadows behind this truck driver, and he's like, yeah, hit the button. Go ahead. And I'm going to make you lunch meat. I'm going to make you my puppet. And so we have Boone, who has the truck driver hit the red button, and Boone kills truck driver. So later on in this episode, we are to end this episode with Detective Boone yet again. So we have this police officer who's seeing this car, and so she is looking at the very back of this car to see that there is some guy who is holding a tooth. So this police officer is calling this in. Excuse me, guy with a tooth here? Guy with a tooth. And so we have this police officer who's hearing some rumblings in the trunk. She goes and notices that there's some waitress in the trunk. And so we have Boone sneaking up behind her, and he is going to make her another piece of lunch meat, his puppet, yet again, and go and kill him. Boone is going to kill this female detective, and that's how they end this show. Bizarrely, I don't understand why. So let's get into the big action sequence dealio. So here's the thing. So, like I said, we had Blade who found Kane's headquarters, and so we eventually have Chase and Krista making it to these headquarters as well. So we find out that this entire headquarters is completely empty, with just one guy that Blade had interrogated and had taped with his mouth closed. And now we have Chase and Krista going like, you know what, this guy can't be booby-trapped. Blade doesn't do that. How about we just rip this tape and just see what happens? And so we have Krista who's telling Chase via stop that could be a bad move, but too bad. Krista has put too much tape off of this man's face to have a bomb go off. And so we have Chase and Krista, we have Krista who's shoving Chase out of the way from this bombardier going off, but that kills a lot of the other vampires, and so it just leaves Chase and Krista alive. So Blade has already come through Kane's place and cleared it out of all vampire people, or human people, whichever. It is what it is. So Blade is like, well, hey, buddies, you came in here and you were in this spot to just be dropping out of the fire but go back into the oven kind of thing. And so we have Blade who's being very intimidating, but here's the thing, we end up having Fritz before he is to leave to go to Calcutta or wherever the heck that he's going. Also in the Krista and Marcus whole dinner debacle, we end up finding that Marcus has 12 houses of vampires. And so Kirsten asks, well, is everybody in this room all vampires? Kirsten is dumb. But she's smart when it fits her to be. Oh my god. So so Blade is coming in here, and he's all being the intimidated guy in the shadows. And so Fritz heard that Chase and Krista are going to have a tough time. So Fritz is like, well, before I go out to where I'm going to go, I'm going to go on and try to kill Blade one more last time, because I just want to beat somebody up. And so Fritz comes in flying through this wall, let's just say, to hit Blade with his car, to have Blade eventually fight Fritz into this cage match because evidently like the last fight wasn't exciting enough that there just has to be this brawl in this cage match. Of course, this is to replicate because this show was going on right after a UFC thing. So cage fight, they have to kind of mimic UFC. It's so goofy. So we have Chase who is to tell Krista, hey, how about you go and you try and take down Fritz because he's doing what he's not supposed to. And so we have Krista going and having to take out Fritz, and immediately Fritz is just like, are you kidding me? Like, I'm going to knock this woman out to next Sunday. And so we have Fritz taking out Krista, and so Krista ends up going and watching Blade and Fritz fight it out, and we have Chase is like, Krista, move your batukas, like, come on, take one of them out, do something, you lazy piece of trash, like basically. So we have Krista who just like takes a sign, and this sign has like one of those like normal just like she takes the end of this sign where the like it actually has the sign part, and so Krista chops off the head of Fritz, and I'm like, dude, that sign is not that strong to chop off a person's head. That seems completely ridiculous. I think that they should have wrote that out for her to like go and find like some like emergency like fire axe, hit that thing, break that open, and get the axe and go and chop off Fritz's head. But I guess they technically already did that in the pilot episode, so I guess they don't want to do that again because that would seem like they're copying and pasting themselves. But I honestly think they should have found a random sign in the pilot episode for what they did in the pilot episode. I think the axe would have actually worked a lot better in this episode, but they already worked themselves into a corner there, so they just have to do something goofy here. So Fritz loses his head, and now he's dead forever. And so, because the whole thing of it is if like they were just so afraid that Blade was going to be able to catch Fritz, because that's what Blade tells Shen. He's like, yeah, like, I'm going to try and catch Fritz because he's the key to all this. But then eventually when Blade comes back home and Shen is like, well, I thought I thought Fritz was going to be the key to all this. And then we end up having like Blade going like, well, no, like now the key is different. Now the key doesn't fit all that well, but the key is now Krista. Because Shen is thinking like, well, do you think Krista turned native? And Blade's like, no, she's playing a role. Let her play. Like, let her play the role that she's given with these vampire people to have all these vampire people give her the sweet thumbs up, so that way they can like really like tell her even more of the vampire secrets, so that way they can trust her. And so that way when eventually she turns on all of them and just like, haha, I was working for Blade this whole entire time, everybody's like, say what? And then they just blow up and they all die, sadly enough. So I don't know if that actually happens. I don't remember the show that well, but I just wanted to make a joke there. So we go on, and so we have Krista killing Fritz, and then eventually we have Blade, who I guess just runs off. And so we have Marcus, who is carrying Krista into this hospital wing to try and see that Krista is going to be all well and bangers and mash and whichever. Like, thumbs up for her, I guess. But with that said, I think that's all that I had to say about this episode. I think that finishes up this episode. If there probably was anything going on with this episode that felt relevant, it didn't. This one felt like a filler episode. But eventually, some of these things might be important somewhere else. But there was a lot of stuff where I was just like, okay, this is just a lot of like, every episode they try to give you more information. They like figure out some kind of scene to try and help people understand this world more. And every single episode has to be that. Plus, every single episode has to be that Blade is trying to get information from somebody, interrogate somebody, beat them up. Every single episode is going to be that, because really, that's the problem with a like a Blade series. Like, they don't have a lot for Blade to do. If anything, this series actually very much echoes the Punisher video game. Like, I remember in the Punisher video game, like, I think that's all that the Punisher did, was just interrogate people and murder people, till eventually he got to more cool and interesting villains to eventually take down. I think at one point, like, they probably ran out of Punisher villains, and I think at one point he had to like fight like Iron Man in that video game. But that was a video game that was such a long time ago. But with that said, I'm gonna get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody.